While Louis XVIII ascended the throne, he could not go back to the old order of absolute monarchy. Instead, a two-house parliament existed, a constitutional monarchy. However, to vote, one must own a large amount of land. Many of the new bourgeoisie were not happy with this. Additionally, the old landed aristocracy wanted to recreate the first and second estates with the clergy. These ultras were led by the Comte d'Artois, the king's brother. When Louis died in 1824, the Comte d'Artois becomes the new king and assumes the name Charles X. Charles X allows the émigrés, the aristocracy that fled from Napoleon, to obtain money for their lands they lost. He also gave the church more responsibility in education, therefore threatening secularism. However, his conservative backers lost in the elections of 1830 to the Liberals. Charles reacted by dissolving the lower house of Parliament. The bulk of the populace, led by the new bourgeoisie, revolted. Charles X was forced to step down, and Duke Louis-Philippe of Orleans becomes the new king. This successful revolution by liberals inspired Catholic Belgium to declare independence from Holland. Other rebellions began in Poland and Italy but were quashed by their masters. Although Great Britain had been a constitutional monarchy, the vast majority of its citizens did not have the right to vote. The aristocracy and bourgeoisie held the power. When the bulk of the British lived in rural areas, the aristocracy was safe. However, due to industrialization, Great Britain was becoming more urbanized. The cities swelled with unskilled factory workers who wanted a better standard of living. The British sought to pass reforms rather than risking revolution. In 1828, Parliament passed a law that stated non-Anglicans can obtain posts in the government and universities. This opened up the doors for Catholics and other Protestants. In 1833, slavery was abolished in the British Empire. However, the United States still allowed slavery, and this becomes an irritant with the British. In 1835, the Municipal Corporations Act was passed. This act allowed small towns to confront the problems of urban growth. They could make decisions instead of relying on the central government, and this helped with sanitation. Doctors understood that the spread of cholera and many diseases were caused by public disposal of waste. Finally, Parliament passes the Reform Act of 1832, which expanded suffrage to more men by lowering the number of acres a voter needed. This still did not appease the urban workers, but was an evolutionary development. Once again, Great Britain became the leader of Europe in responsible government. Rather than being conservative, trying to keep the status quo, the British implemented liberal laws that changed over time. Eventually, all males were given the right to vote. A new round of intellectual thought came to be in the 1800s after the French Revolution. On one hand, you had Conservatism, led by Edmund Burke. He wrote Reflections on the Revolution in France. He blamed the philosophers of the Enlightenment for trying to establish a republic. The lower classes were not educated enough to lead, and this led to anarchy and civil war that produced a dictator to try and restore order. He believed the forsaking of the Catholic Church was a mistake because it was inherent to French traditional culture. Religion was the basis of a country's civil society, so therefore only the elite should be in government. Opposed to this idea was liberalism. While conservatives sought to keep the status quo, such as an inherited base aristocracy, the rise of the bourgeoisie, the new rich, wanted their own political rights. Much of this is based on the premise of capitalism. One is rewarded for working hard. An individual keeps the profits, which then goes into property, capital, etc. The liberals did not think the state should interfere and believed that the poor only had themselves to blame for their plight. The liberals believed in the first part of the French Revolution, the overthrow of the monarchy, but disagreed with the Jacobins to give full political rights to the poor and uneducated. Jeremy Bentham was a leader in liberal thought in Great Britain. His philosophy is based on the two feelings of pleasure and pain. If a government adopts policies that causes more pain than pleasure, then they should be overturned. Since a government is responsible to all the people, then it is necessary to expand political freedom and rights to all the people. This would contrast with Burke's view. Just because a society had practiced this position in the past, part of its moral character, that does not mean that policy was correct. Bentham supported universal suffrage as well as a secret ballot. As opposed to both these, or should I say in between of both of these, is the idea of socialism. Socialism is more of an economic philosophy based on society to make laws that alleviate a vast socio-economic divide between the rich and the poor. In other words, tax the rich and give to the poor. Robert Owen owned numerous cotton mills in Scotland and decided to provide a better workplace for his employees. He provided sanitary homes for his workers, started to educate them during off hours. He also banned children to work in the factories. The end result was that the employees were happier and more productive. Therefore, the extra money that Owen spent was recouped by the bottom line. He wanted the English Parliament to promote these ideas into national laws, but Parliament did not pass them at that point. Socialism is a reform of capitalism. Rather than just having monopolies be created, it's a reform where if there are some injustices, you tax people at the higher level more, and then you provide that to the government to redistribute the funds to the poor. Going much further is Karl Marx. He was born a German Jew, although his father was forced to become a Protestant to keep his job. Marx became an editor but was forced to move from Prussia due to his extreme liberal beliefs. He traveled to Paris and met Friedrich Engels. In 1848, they published the Communist Manifesto calling for the workers of the world to unite and overthrow the capitalist system. This aroused hostility by the French government, and he was forced to move to a more liberal London. There he wrote Capital, which foresaw a violent worldwide socialist revolution between the bourgeoisie capitalists and the proletariat wage earners. The wealthy owned the businesses and ran the government. They passed laws to uphold their positions at the expense of the poor. Mass production would be tedious and repetitive, which dampened individualism. The end result of the socialist revolution would be a classless and more cooperative communal society. This would be communism. Communism, we now know, does not work because they do not allow for individual prosperity.